Hi, my name is Catherine, otherwise known as the Crafty Bird. Today I'm going to teach you how to take a dull, boring mirror and give it a new lease of life with a rustic boho makeover. So here's the mirror that I plan to transform. It's quite a large mirror. At the moment it looks a little bit drab. And what I plan to do is to paint the edges here in Collins Barracks in the Crafty Bird Antique Milk Paints. Decoupage in here with some ornamental gift wrap, nice orange colour there, and then in here I'm going to paint in Curraclow Dunes, and then in here I'm going to just do a little bit of gold gilding, so that should liven up the mirror. And in order to start, I've sugar soaked and to get all the excess dirt and grease off. And what I'm going to do next is prime, because the Crafty Bird milk paint, in order to paint it onto melamine, which is what this is, we'd need to prime it first. As a Crafty Bird antique milk paint is suitable for porous surfaces, and this is highly lacquered. I've taped off all my edges here so that I don't destroy the actual mirror, and I'll start with priming. So the primer that I'm going to use on this is Zinsser Bullseye 123, or Zinsser Bin is another one that's very good. And I'm not too fussy about how I apply it. I'm just going to paint it on a thin layer until it's all painted all the way around. So I'm going to use Collins Barracks today. This is a 30-gram sample, makes up about 130 mils of paint when mixed with equal parts of tepid water. So I've emptied half of this bag into this cup. As you can see there, just half. So I'm only going to use a tiny amount, and I always recommend you mix gradually rather than dumping the whole lot of your powder in. Just use half of it and then add to it later if you need to. Better to need to add more water than more powder. So I'm just going to add a dribble, literally a dribble of water, as you can see there, into the middle, and I'm going to stir. So I'm going to mix that. It takes a couple of minutes. If I may need to add more water. See, it kind of looks a little bit lumpy. So I'm going to add a little dribble more water. And mix. So I'll be back in a moment when this is mixed. So this is now mixed, and as you can see, it's like single cream consistency. Shouldn't be too watery, but then again, it shouldn't be too thick either. You can mix it to whatever consistency you want. If you want block coverage, make it a little thicker. If you want a bleached lime wash effect, you can add more water. Today I'm using it for block coverage, so I've made it like a single cream consistency. There we go. Okay, so ready to paint. So I've started painting. I'll just stop to show you what I'm doing. I've started painting the edges in Collins Barracks. With antique milk paint, you really don't need to worry about how you apply the paint, whether it needs to be applied evenly or in a straight line. You don't need to worry about that because you don't get brush strokes with this paint. It dries in block coverage, so that's one less thing for people to worry about. So the other thing to remember is that I'm applying this, it looks quite dark. It will always dry about one shade lighter on average, about a little bit lighter than the wet colour. So I'm just going to continue applying it around the edges here, and then we can move on to Curraclow Dunes on the inner part here. So now this is 10 minutes later, approximately, or less than 10 minutes later, and I've done all the outside, as you can see. in Collins Barracks, and as you can see, within less than 10 minutes it started to dry. So it dries super fast, which is great because I think I'm going to give this a second coat. One coat could do it for me for this one, but I do want to cover up any bits of primer that might be showing through. So I'm now mixing Coraclow Dunes into this container that I mixed Collins Barracks into. The reason that I'm not using a new container is because if a hint of the Collins Barracks goes into the Coraclow Dunes, it'll be okay. I don't mind because I've used it on the outer part of the frame. So I'm just going, with equal parts of water, I've mixed this up. I'm just going to mix it now and apply it to the inside of the mirror. So I have mixed this now once again to single cream consistency. There it is there. And I'm just going to apply this with quite a skinny brush. And I'll just start at the top here. Again, because this is milk paint, you don't need to worry about brush strokes. I also don't need to be too careful because I've put my masking tape all around. So I'll be back in a moment once I've given this one coat. So I've done one coat of Coraclow Dunes just all around the inside edge of the frame. And as you can see, it's already drying really quickly. So it dries out, all antique milk paint dries out a shade lighter than the wet version. So I think I might need to give this a second coat. Just because it's quite a light shade. So these are the scrap pieces of paper that I'm going to decoupage around the inside of the frame. So I'm going to need to cut these up to size into strips, and I'm going to layer them in this order. I think they kind of complement each other in that order. So I'm going to need to measure this part here and then cut them up, and I'm going to do them in small batches rather than one long strip, so that because I think you have more control when you decoupage in small pieces. So I'm just going to measure now and then cut my paper and then begin applying the Mod Podge. So I'm going to do the decoupage section of the mirror now. Today I'm using Mod Podge Matte, and what I'm going to do is apply a thin layer in small sections, and I'm going to do this really quickly because Mod Podge dries very quickly. Next, I'm just going to fan it and just let it go a little bit tacky. And now I'm just going to apply my gift wrap. So my first piece will just go here, and I'm just going to tap it in like this. And just keep pressing around the edges to make sure that you don't get any lifting corners. And so that's the first one done, and then I move on to the middle one. Oops. And just press it in again. You have to move very quickly with Mod Podge because it dries really, really quickly. That's the second one done. That's the second one done. And then I'm just going to apply another thin layer over here and apply the last one. It's important that you don't apply too thick a layer of Mod Podge, because then it causes wrinkles and bubbles. So just a thin layer, it will do it. But you do need to make sure that you get all of it covered so that you don't get lifting edges. See there, I've got a little bit going on the paint there. And I apply my last piece of paper. And I'm going to just press it in there. Again, just keep pressing it into the corners. Don't worry about any excess sliding out of the edges, you can just wipe them away. And they dry in anyway. So, it's the first strip across the top done. And I'm just going to move on to the sides now. So I've started to sand back certain areas, edges and on the inside and on the outer frame. I've also started to sand the decoupage areas because I don't want them to look too shiny. I don't want them to look like they've just been glued on. So as you can see, probably over here I've got, so I'll compare down here, fairly shiny. And then I move up here and it kind of goes a little bit dull. So this is where I've started sanding back. Now you do have to be careful when you're sanding areas that you've decoupaged, because you don't want to rip the paper. Areas I'm going to particularly focus on are places like in here where the papers are almost mismatched. So yeah, I'm gonna sand them back. I'm going to keep going here. So I have distressed the entire piece, and to be honest, I'm still looking at the decoupage and I'm still feeling that it could look a little bit older than it is. So what I'm going to do is take the black stuff from the Crafty Bird Antique Milk Paint range, and I'm just going to dip my finger into a sample bag, and I'm going to just lightly brush my finger over the areas that I feel are still a little bit shiny. That does the job. That actually works. Now it doesn't look so brand new. Now down here. So it looks like it's had years of history attached to it. I'm just going to continue with this all the way around, and then we're just going to apply our lacquer as a final touch. So my final step here is to finish the piece with the Crafty Bird water-based lacquer. This is an ultra matte finish. It's actually got a 10% sheen, but it's barely visible. It's really durable. Touch dries in 15 minutes, and I totally recommend it for finishing all of your pieces. It's great for high traffic areas such as kitchens, dining tables, and even though this will be hung on a wall, I still recommend this as a finishing product. So I've put very little on there, barely on the edge of it and the tip of it, and I'm just going to very lightly run over the edges with it. Now, as with all finishing products on milk paint, when you first apply your finishing product, the paint will appear translucent. It looks like the paint has come off. It's actually not the case. It just looks like that. It appears diluted. Within 15 minutes, I will show you this will have dried out the original colour to what it was before I put the lacquer on. So don't panic if you put your finishing product on, like a wax or a lacquer, and it goes this diluted shade. It'll dry out in block colour again in a few minutes. So I'm now just going to add a tiny little bit of gilding wax just around the outer edges. See, around outside here, just to give it a little bit of contrast next to the decoupage and the Curaclow Dunes. So I'm just going to use the tiniest amount of this. This gives a lovely antique finish. So it's the tiniest amount. I'm just going to rub it in. See along the edge